In this video we're going to review the LAS Legend display settings and also just a brief introduction to the live view filter and why it's important to use that. So we've already loaded our LAS data. By default you should see this displayed in elevation gradient view, and we're going to display by points. We're going to change that from points to display a 10 surface. Alright, and so by default in the LAS Legend up here we're displaying by elevation gradient. As I zoom in you'll see that change. Okay, so as we're zoomed out, it's going to be pretty large changes in elevation for the colors to be different. As I zoom in, it's going to take less of an elevation change to show dramatic changes in the way the color is represented on the screen. It's just a really good general way to visualize the data, such as stockpiles or just changes in elevation. You can see that vehicles and conveyors are really popping out, as well as vegetation. So we've got vegetation in between these stockpiles. It's really easy to visualize that here. And if we have especially noisy data, such as really heavy vegetation, you can see it's going to show as being quite noisy in this view. The next display I want to review is elevation by color bands. It's kind of a graphical or representation of contours. As you can see here, I believe by default we have a 2-foot contour interval. As you can see, as I zoom in and out, that display is not changing. And this is really useful for seeing the edges of stockpiles, just to make sure that you've got your stockpile extents defined correctly. Usually for these drone-derived data sets where our ground sample distance is maybe an inch, 2 inches, something like that, maybe even a little bit less. Showing this as 2-foot contours just really doesn't give you a good idea of the resolution of the data, and it's kind of hard to see the edges of where these stockpiles begin. So usually I'll go into the live view filter, click on the elevation tab, go to symbology. We can change the not only can we change the previous view we're looking at, the elevation gradient, but we can also change our color band settings. We can change that interval, just like a contour interval. I'm going to change that to 1/2 foot. And this is going to be whatever unit that your data is in. This happens to be feet, so you'd want to change it. If you were doing meters, you wanted to represent feet, you just want to make sure that that meters meets the conversion to feet. And I want to do a sharp transition. You can change this to a smooth transition, but I find that seeing those edges of where those elevation changes are happening is easier to visualize if we have a sharp transition. Let's go ahead and click OK. I'm going to close this, and it's going to ask me, hey, do you want to save the changes you've made to the display settings here? I'm going to say yes. We could create a new, this is called again, this is the live view filter. We could create a new filter just for color bands, just to represent that. I'm just going to update the existing showing all points live view filter with the color band settings that I want. I'm going to click OK. That way, whenever I exit LP360 and come in later and work on another project, it's still going to be 1/2 foot visualization of those color bands. And you can see if we zoom in on this stockpile here, it's really easy to see where that stockpile is really beginning. You can see it's a little bit more accurate representation of that. Okay. All right. So the next option we have here is display by classification. This data was pulled in directly from Metashape. That's where we've derived our point cloud from. As you can see, Everything is in a single classification. It's in created never classified, class 0. If we had some classifications here, we would see possibly these vehicles, buildings, vegetation, different colors. In a little bit here we'll set up the live view filter to display only unclassified, and let's say we had done some classifications and we're just wanting to see data that hasn't been classified yet. We could set the filter up to show that for this view. And all these views can be seen in a profile view, 3D view, so on. We're going to display by intensity. Can do that. Monochromatic. Return combination, because this is data derived from photography, we just have a single return. If this is LIDAR data, we would see different colors here representing different return combinations possibly. Just for this data set from, we've taken pictures from a drone, this is what we're going to see, just a single return combination. Display by point source ID, it's all the same. This is a really nice feature for, we've derived these points from photography, so every point has an RGB value. Okay. Display by file, this is a single file, but normally you would have multiple files. You can see how they're broken down with that view. Display by elevation difference. Okay. And display by point density. So you can see the edges here with the vegetation. It gets pretty noisy. We've got some on the outliers of our project. We've got less point density, but for the most part, our project's processed in Metashape. It's going to have the same point density throughout the project. We'll switch back to display by elevation gradient. Let's briefly look at the live view filter. Let's go to the classification tab. Now you can see here that the count is in black, and that means that this has been scanned previously to see where the points are located. That means I haven't done any changes to the classification recently, so probably a extremely accurate representation of where the points are classification wise. If this is in red, that means some changes have occurred, or maybe LP360 is estimating where those what classification those points are in. So if that's the case, if you see this as displayed in red, you can hit scan, and LP360 will do a full scan of all the points and just tell you very accurately where those points are located classification wise. So just a nice feature there. Let's say we wanted to display just unclassified. We've done some manual classification or some low point noise classification on this data set using some different tasks in LP360. We'll just simply toggle all the classes off. I'll just choose created never classified, and we can click the save button up here. Let's create a new point cloud, a new live view filter called unclassified. Click OK. Now we have that to choose from in the drop down, and this will be extended to our 3D, and we can choose it in our 3D and our profile views as well. You can see by default we already have a ground classification that you can use. So if you had your points in, say, ground, you just want to display those, you could easily do that here. By default, you're showing all points, and then of course the other default one is canopy. So it's just a very brief introduction into the live view filter, and also showing off those LAS legend display settings.